We have a simple choice. Either money today or blood tomorrow.
A blunt message from the Polish PM Donald Tusk as leaders gather to discuss the billions in Russian assets frozen in the EU. Once released, that money would help Ukraine's war effort, but the plan has faced significant opposition from some member states. Meanwhile, Roman Abramovich is yet to fulfil his pledge to send the £2.5 billion from Chelsea Football Club's sale to Ukraine. Keir Starmer says the government is prepared to take him to court over it.
The clock is ticking. Honour the commitment that you made and pay up now.
So can the Russian money be unfrozen? And how desperately does Ukraine need it?
They are doing so well in terms of their own weapons production, but a financial collapse there would be disastrous.
I'm Faye Barker, and this is what you need to know. Joining me is our Europe editor, James Mate. So first of all, James, how much are these frozen assets actually worth?
The numbers are necessarily vague, and I'll explain why. When Russia launched its full-scale invasion in 2022, about 300 billion euros in assets worldwide was frozen by the West. It's a lot of money. Yeah. Roughly 200 billion of that in the EU, 25 billion in the UK, but other money elsewhere as well. And the reason the numbers are vague is because all that time in these last 3.5 years, it's been earning interest, which is now included in the total. So, and no one's quite sure exactly how much that is in each particular tranche. So we talk in necessarily vague, but very, very large numbers. And the numbers that they're talking about at the European Council summit, in the latest step in their effort to deal with this money, is around about 170, 180 billion euros.
I mean, it's a significant amount of money, isn't there? No doubt about that. And as you said, a chunk of these assets are frozen in Europe, but a lot of them are held by a company called Euroclear. Now, just explain to us who that is.
It's the bank you've never heard of. Euroclear is basically a bank for banks. So it's where banks put their money. They put their collateral, they put their margin, it clears a lot of their trade, so money comes in, goes back out. It's sort of it's part of the financial plumbing worldwide. Euroclear being one of the biggest clearing houses, privately owned. There are other big ones in London and New York as well, obviously. Euroclear is based in Belgium, and that is where a lot of the Russian money was being held because the Russians found it convenient and useful too. It lubricated all their other financial business, both in Europe and further afield, and that's where it was at the moment that the freezing order came in.
And when you look at discussing unfreezing these billions and billions of euros, that is all to fund Ukraine's war effort. That's the plan. But how could that work?
Well, the idea is not that you're necessarily going to unfreeze the money itself, and certainly not that you're going to give Russia any access to it, but that you would use that money as collateral for an enormous loan to Ukraine to keep its economy afloat over the next few years. The idea would be that you would assign this as the collateral, you would lend Ukraine the money, and then at some point, when the war ends, and assuming that any settlement of the war, any peace deal would include reparations being paid by Russia for the damage it's caused to Ukraine, that money would then repay the loan to the financial markets where it came from. So it's a complex thing. The Russians obviously absolutely furious about it and threatening all sorts of retaliation and threatening that any remaining European assets still in Russia, they of course were all frozen. A lot of them have been seized. Basically, people have written them off, but on paper they're still there. Many, many billions, nothing like as much as this, but many billions still held in Russia that they would all be expropriated. So it would cause massive ructions if they agree to this, but they can't find any other way at the moment to finance a loan of the size that is needed. Because you're talking about European countries who already have enormous debt burdens of their own and don't wish to add to them.
And was my understanding that some of the interest has already been used to help Ukraine's war effort.
Yes, and this has been much easier. The idea that interest earned is not something the Russians can expect, even if their principal and their capital was their property, but interest earned while the money was sitting in these accounts could be used, and that already has been, again, either as grants or loans to Ukraine. The idea being that basically Russia will never see this money again.
And I guess going back to the stuff that the money that is frozen, and Belgium's position in particular, Euroclear, the bank you mentioned, is based in Belgium, and that's causing some complications for the country, Belgium itself.
Well, their worries are many. They worry that if Russia is able to take legal action against them, that they could, and if a court rules in Russia's favour, which most legal experts think is pretty unlikely, that if a court were to rule in Russia's favour, that they would be on the hook to repay Russia this 170 billion euros, which is a lot for a country like Belgium. They worry that they will be the focus of Russian retaliation. And that they would bear the brunt of it, that the Russians would actually blame Belgium rather than the EU in general. But also they worry about the financial health and future of Euroclear. Now, as you said, these numbers are enormous, 200, 300 billion. Euroclear has about 40 trillion euros.
Yeah.
Sort of in its accounts, effectively, to put it in its simplest form.
Yeah.
So yes, it's a lot of money, but nothing compared to this enormous business, which is financial clearing. And the rating agencies have already said we may have to downgrade Euroclear's credit rating if you do this. There are clearers in London who are worried about the impact this would have on clearing businesses everywhere, would in future. Long after this is over, would everyone be worried that if you put money into clearing in another country, that one day it would be vulnerable to seizure or expropriation or being used as reparations? So you can see all these financial worries, but they focus most heavily on Belgium, which has absolutely so far held out. I think a breakthrough on the Belgian front is probably unlikely at the moment, but it may happen.
So we're discussing how Europe is dealing with this. We can't, of course, rule out Donald Trump, of course, over the United States. He will no doubt have a view on this. And does he have any plan?
Yeah, get his hands on as much of this money as he can. Now, the Americans have been working very hard to persuade Europe not to do this, particularly working on countries like Italy, which has been wavering, on Belgium, on Hungary, and on Slovakia, who are much more pro-Putin than the rest of the EU and may vote against any of these plans anyway. They could be outvoted, it seems. There's probably a way around them. But the Americans have been working very, very hard to try and stop the Europeans doing this. And the reason is that they see it as part of a peace settlement. Now, on the one hand, that sounds quite sensible. That if this is something you can offer the Russians to cease fire, to do a deal, to stop claiming land that they don't have, and that this should be a bargaining chip still available for the peace negotiators. And that sort of is quite sensible. But on the other hand of it, the Witkoff, Jared Kushner plan that was they've been trying to foist on Ukraine, much to Ukraine and Europe's unhappiness, included the idea that 50% of this money will be put into a joint US-Russian investment fund, and that the US would enjoy 50% of the profits from that, and that the other half could be spent in some ways to rebuild parts of Ukraine, but through the American economy and American companies, everyone else. So it will surprise no one to know that to learn that Trump has seen a money-making opportunity in all this, and it is a lot of money, as you rightly said, and the potential profits for US and US businesses and the US government are huge, and they don't want to see that disappear because the Europeans are doing stuff that they don't want to do.
I mean, this is when the sort of optics of it and the feel of it starts getting into very difficult territory, doesn't it? I mean, if you go back to the situation in Ukraine itself, how this money could be used. I mean, how desperate as a country is Ukraine to have actually this financial support? And it obviously come from what they see as their enemy.
Yeah, I mean, it's really important to keep the Ukrainian economy stable, because a financial collapse at the moment could be utterly devastating to their war effort. And, it's hard to get the problems Ukrainians have. Obviously, manpower, not much we can do about that. Weapons, to a certain degree, although it's much harder now that the Americans aren't giving them weapons any longer, although they will agree to sell weapons to Europe to give to them. But it's become much harder to get weapons.
It's all about business, it feels now, doesn't it?
So much of it. But avoiding a financial collapse, and it's estimated that basically to keep the Ukrainian economy going for the next 2 years will require a loan in the region of 135 billion euros. Now, can that be got from European own funds? I mean, it's a lot of money when everybody's struggling to bring down deficits and debts, and already there are. But I mean, in the context of the European economy, it's not that much money, to be honest. It's something that theoretically Germany could fund with its low debt burdens very easily. It doesn't want to take all the burden itself, obviously. So ultimately, if none of these schemes to use the Russian money come to fruition, the EU and possibly UK as well will have to put their hands in their own pockets to once again to collateralize, to give a guarantee to a loan that fundamentally will probably never be paid back. So, I mean, it would be an enormous financial effort. But it is absolutely essential to the Ukrainian economy. They are doing so well in terms of their own weapons production, in terms of building the stuff they need and keeping their sort of grain and fertilizer exports going, and basically doing as much as they possibly can for their own war effort. But a financial collapse there would be disastrous.
So looking a bit close to home, many people will remember, I'm sure, the £2.5 billion sale of Chelsea Football Club from Roman Abramovich now has been told by the Prime Minister here, Sir Keir Starmer, saying you've got to release that £2.5 billion from the Chelsea sale. The Prime Minister saying if that doesn't happen, I'm going to take you to court. So this is all another sort of complicated layer, but something I know anyone who has followed this story and the Roman Abramovich, Chelsea, etc., will want to know. So what exactly is going to happen, and what was agreed, and can that be paid?
Well, if you remember, immediately after Russia's full-scale invasion, it clearly became untenable for Roman Abramovich, who is possibly the biggest Russian oligarch, known to be close to Putin, to continue to own Chelsea Football Club. This, he was under threat of sanctions and everything that went with it. So he said he was going to sell it, and he also made a firm commitment then that the £2.5 billion that he got for Chelsea would go to helping the victims of the war. Now, since that time, so the money's been frozen. He still owns it, but he has no access to it. But he will not release it, partly because he says, when I said the victims of war, I meant the victims on both sides. Right. So, yes, that can go to a humanitarian fund, but half of that has to go to Russia. Now, that is obviously unacceptable, in that who knows what would happen to it if it went to Russia, and it could end up just funding the Russian war effort. So that has been unacceptable and has been a major sticking point. The other thing he says is, well, actually, 1.4 billion of that was owed to another company, so I can't give that to the humanitarian fund because I owe it to someone else. But the someone else is himself. I mean, he owns the other company. So he is clearly doing everything he can not to hand that money over to the Ukrainians, even for humanitarian reasons, which may well be because he's under pressure from the Kremlin not to do so. But that's now what we're talking 3.5 years ago. And I think the British government is losing patience and is about to, if he doesn't agree, I think the deadline now is March. If he doesn't agree by March to at least start that transfer, that Keir Starmer was pretty clear. Court action will be taken, and it is sort of thought, although I'm no legal expert, but reading the legal commentaries on this, it's thought that it's quite likely that the British government would have a solid enough case and would be able to get the money from Abramovich.
It is, when you think about this amount of money, at the moment, it's just sat doing nothing, I suppose, is it? It's just gaining interest.
It's earning interest, and I mean, it's nothing like as big a sum as we've just been talking about, but nonetheless, £2.5 billion is a lot.
Yeah.
It's not chicken feed.
No.
And it certainly wouldn't be chicken feed to the Ukrainians, and particularly to the Ukrainian, victims of war, displaced children, people, made homeless, driven out of eastern or southern Ukraine. It would go a very long way to making their lives very significantly easier, which is why, I think patience is being lost with Abramovich's apparently, willingness 3.5 years ago to do the right thing with this money. And I think patience is being lost now that so much time has gone by without that money ever being released.
Yeah, certainly seems that way, doesn't it? James, thank you so much. Really interesting to discuss all this with you. And you can find more analysis from James and all the ITV News team at itv.com/news and also on our YouTube channel. Until our next briefing, thanks for joining us.